Welcome back to another chapter. This is Vedat from Programmership. In this chapter, we are gonna talk about some conditional expressions which are if, else, and else if. Sometimes we want to run a block of code when a certain condition happens. To perform such a condition, we use conditional expressions. If, else, and else if are one of those conditional expressions. So let's make an example and see how it works. Let's say var my score is equal to, let's say 90, and here I want to define a condition. Let's say if my score is greater than, let's say 70, and open your curly brackets and close it. So here in this example, we just create a condition. If my score is greater than 70, the lines of code that inside this curly bracket will be executed. So let's say print master player. So let's give it a run and see the result. Hit run, and here we can see master player will be printed out. Why? Because this condition returns true. Our my score variable is 90, so that means it is greater than 70. If I change it to, let's say 60 and try to run it, nothing happens because this condition returns false. I think you got the idea. We can also use parentheses while defining a condition, just like that, but it is optional. We can also combine this condition with the else statement. Else is used if the previous condition is false. Here, let's say else, start your curly brackets and close it. Let's say print beginner. So if I hit run, the beginner will be printed out, just like that. Because my score is 60 and the first condition returns false. If the previous conditions returns false, then the else statement will be executed. This is the most basic if-else usage. We can also create multiple conditions by using the else-if statement. Else-if statement is checked if the previous condition is not true. Let's go on with the same example. Let's delete all the stuff. Let's say if my score is greater than 90, open your curly bracket and let's say print master. So let's add another condition. Let's say else if my score is greater than 60, open your curly bracket and say print, let's say intermediate, and let's say else print beginner. So at first the compiler will check the first condition, which is my score is greater than 90. If this is true, the master will be printed and the rest of the condition will be ignored. If this is not true, then the compiler will look at the second condition, which is else if my score is greater than 60. If this is true, then the else will be ignored and it prints the intermediate. If this also is not true, then the else statement will work and the print beginner will be executed. So let's try to change the my score variable, let's say 91, and hit run. It says master. Why? Because the my score is greater than 90. So the rest of the conditions will be ignored. It print master. Let's say 90 and try to run. Here we can see intermediate. Why? Because it says my score, if my score is greater than 90, not equal. If I write equal, it means my score is greater than 90 or equal to 90. If I hit run, then it will print the master. So let's say 80 and hit run again. It says intermediate. Let's define a value which is less than 60. Let's say 50 and hit run. Look, the beginner was printed out. So let's make another example. Delete these stuffs. Let's say var my node is equal to 80 and let's make some condition. If my node is greater than 90, print A. Else if my node is greater than 70, open your curly bracket and say print B. So let's add another condition. Else if my node is greater than 50, let's print C. Else for the other cases, print D. Here we use two else if statement. You can also use more than that. Let's hit run and see the result. Here we can see the B. Why? Because the first if statement returns false, then the compiler looks for the next condition, which is my node is greater than 70. In this case, my node is 80 and this returns true, so these lines of code will be executed. We can use multiple conditions in a single line by using logic AND operator. Let's apply it to this example. Let's say my node is greater than 90, give a space and say AND. So this symbol is logic AND in Swift. Let's say my node is smaller or equal to 100. So here at the first if statement, we just used two different conditions with the AND operator. To execute this block of code, the both condition must return true value. So here must be true and the other condition must also be true. So let's say 100 and hit run, we can see it prints A. If we say 80 or let's say 60, hit run, we can see the C was printed because my node is greater than 50. There is also a logic OR operator that is used for creating multi-conditions in a single line, but this doesn't work like logic AND operator. If you use a logic OR operator, it will run the block of code if one of the conditions is true. So let's see that in a different example. Let's delete all of this and say var, say my user name is equal to the dot. Let's create another variable var my password is equal to the dot password. So here I want to check whether one of these variables are empty or not, and I will use logic OR operator. Let's say if my username is equal to empty string, or so this double vertical line represents logic OR operator in Swift, and give a space, or my password is equal to empty string, open your curly brackets and say print fields could not be empty. Otherwise, let's say else welcome. So let's hit run. As you can see, it says welcome. Why? Because my user is not empty and my password is not empty. If one of these variables are empty, then it will execute this block of codes. Let's make my username empty and hit run again. And as you can see, because my username is empty, the first if statement will be executed. All right, that was a quick look at some conditional expressions in Swift. See you in the next one. Goodbye.